The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the artificial sweetness of my sister's perfume. This was supposed to be my night. After 3 years of building a life with Mark, and 10 years of building a career that finally allowed me to afford a celebration like this, I was standing in a room full of people who were finally looking at me. Or so I thought. I smoothed the silk of my champagne-colored dress, my heart thumping a steady rhythm against my ribs. I'm the quiet sister, the one who worked late, the one who sent the wire transfers when my parents' mortgage fell behind, the one who stayed in the shadows while my sister, Elena, basked in the spotlight of her own chaos. I wonder, as you're listening to this, maybe while doing chores or driving home, have you ever felt completely invisible to the people who are supposed to love you most? Like you're just a supporting character in someone else's messy, loud movie. Tonight was supposed to be the exception. Mark had just finished his toast, his hand warm on the small of my back. The ring on my finger caught the light, a sparkling promise of a future where I came first. But then, I saw Elena. She wasn't looking at me with pride. She was looking at the crowd, her eyes glinting with that familiar, hungry desperation for attention. She didn't wait for the applause to die down. She didn't even wait for us to sit. She simply stepped onto the small podium, snatched the microphone from the stand with a sharp screech of feedback, and placed a hand over her stomach. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with a fake, breathy humility that made my skin crawl. "But I just can't keep this secret for one more second. I know tonight is about your engagement, but I think it's time we celebrate some truly life-changing news." She looked directly at her husband, David, who was sitting at the front table looking pale and exhausted. Then she looked back at the room, a triumphant smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "I'm pregnant," she announced. The room went silent for a heartbeat before erupting into cheers. My mother gasped, knocking over her wine glass as she rushed to embrace Elena. My father followed, his face glowing with a pride I hadn't seen directed at me in a decade. Mark's hand dropped from my back as he, too, stood up to join the commotion. I stood there, frozen, the underestimated sister, once again relegated to the background of my own engagement party. But as Elena hugged my mother, her eyes locked onto mine over Mom's shoulder. It wasn't a look of joy. It was a look of conquest. She thought she had won. She thought she had stolen my night and shoved me back into the dark. What she didn't know was that I had been carrying a small black digital recorder in my clutch all evening, not to catch a pregnancy announcement, but to capture the conversation I'd overheard her having in the powder room 20 minutes earlier. Elena's marriage wasn't just ending, it was about to implode. And I held the fuse. The room was a whirlwind of congratulations. My engagement cake, the one I'd spent weeks picking out, sat forgotten on the side table as the waitstaff hurriedly brought out extra champagne for Elena's miracle. I watched David, Elena's husband. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a man who was drowning and trying to pretend he liked the taste of the salt water. David had always been kind to me, a quiet soul who seemed to be the only one who noticed when I did something right. He was a successful architect, the primary provider for Elena's lavish lifestyle, and more importantly, a man who had been desperately trying to save their crumbling marriage for years. "Isn't it wonderful, Sarah?" My mother beamed, briefly glancing my way as she clutched Elena's hand. "A baby. This changes everything. We'll have to move your wedding date, of course. Elena will be far too pregnant by June to be a bridesmaid, and we can't have her overshadowed." There it was, the pivot. My life's milestones were merely inconveniences in the timeline of Elena's drama. I looked at Elena. She was basking in it, her hand perpetually resting on her still flat stomach, accepting hugs like she was royalty. She leaned in close as she passed me to get a glass of sparkling cider. "Don't look so sour, Sarah," she whispered, her voice a sharp contrast to her public sweetness. "You've always been better at the career thing anyway. Let me have the family spotlight. It's what I'm built for. I felt the weight of the clutch in my hand. Inside, the small digital recorder felt like it was humming. Earlier that evening, while the guests were arriving, I had ducked into the bridal suite to fix a loose thread on my dress. I'd heard voices in the connecting powder room, Elena and her best friend, Chloe. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the first sentence I heard stopped my heart. David actually thinks he's the father. Elena had giggled. Can you believe it? He's so desperate for a reason to stay that he didn't even question the timing. If I didn't get pregnant now, he was going to serve the papers by Monday. This baby is my permanent paycheck, Chloe. And the best part? The real father doesn't even know I'm married. I had pressed record just as she started detailing her affair with a physical therapist she'd met over the summer, the same summer David was away on a 3-month project in Dubai. I stood in the center of my own party, watching my parents dote on a daughter who was currently orchestrating the ultimate betrayal of the man sitting at the head table. I looked at David, who was now being slapped on the back by my father, being congratulated on a legacy that wasn't his. The cruelty wasn't just in the cheating, it was in the calculation. She had chosen my night to launch her safety net, knowing I wouldn't dare cause a scene and look like the bitter, jealous sister. She thought she knew me. She thought I was the girl who would swallow her pride and keep the peace for the sake of the family's reputation. But peace is a luxury for those who aren't being actively hunted. The party surged on around me, a sea of clinking glasses and forced laughter. I felt like a ghost haunting my own celebration. Elena was already directing the caterers to bring out more appetizers, essentially taking over the event coordination as if it were her own baby shower. "Sarah, honey, don't stand there like a statue," my mother whispered, pulling me aside. "Go congratulate your sister properly. People are starting to whisper that you're jealous. It's a bit unseemly, don't you think? Let her have this." Let her have this. The phrase echoed in my mind, a bitter refrain of my entire childhood. Let her have the bigger room. Let her have the car. Let her have the spotlight. I looked at David. He was standing near the balcony, staring out at the city lights. He looked older than he was. His shoulders slumped under the weight of a joy he clearly felt he had to perform. I walked over to him, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. "You okay, David?" I asked softly. He jumped slightly, then offered a weary smile. "Just a lot to take in, Sarah." I thought, well, things have been hard. I thought this might be the thing that finally grounds her. A fresh start for us. My heart ached for him. He was a good man, a builder of structures and lives, currently standing on a foundation of quicksand. "David," I said, my voice steady, "I need you to do something for me. I need you to meet me in the library in 10 minutes. Just you. Tell the others you're getting a cigar or checking a work email." He frowned, confused. "Sarah, is this about the party?" "I'm sorry if Elena—" "It's not about the party," I interrupted, my grip tightening on my clutch. "It's about the truth. Please, 10 minutes. I slipped away before he could argue. I needed a moment of silence to steady my breathing. I ducked into the library, a mahogany-lined room at the back of the venue. The silence here was heavy and cool. I pulled the recorder from my bag. My thumb hovered over the play button. I wondered if I was being cruel. Was I destroying a family before it even started? But then I remembered Elena's face in the mirror, that smirk of conquest. She wasn't building a family. She was building a cage for David and a shield for herself, using a child as a bargaining chip for a lifestyle she didn't want to work for. 10 minutes later, the heavy door creaked open. David stepped in, looking guarded. "Sarah, what's going on? Your mom is looking for you for the sister photo op." "David, I've spent my whole life being the sister who stays quiet to keep the peace," I said, leaning against the desk. "But peace built on a lie isn't peace. It's a slow-motion car crash." I didn't offer a preamble. I didn't try to soften the blow. I simply placed the recorder on the desk and pressed play. The silence of the library was punctured by Elena's voice, shrill, mocking, and unmistakably clear. David actually thinks he's the father. This baby is my permanent paycheck, Chloe. I watched David's face. It didn't turn red with anger. It turned a terrifying, ghostly gray. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just listened as his wife laughed about the physical therapist, the Dubai trip, and the safety net she had woven out of his heart. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was louder than any scream. David looked at the small black device as if it were a poisonous insect. She said, "Permanent paycheck?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "She's planning to use the pregnancy to stop you from serving the divorce papers on Monday," I said firmly. She knew exactly what she was doing when she stood up there tonight. David closed his eyes. For a long moment, I thought he might collapse. But then, his posture shifted. His shoulders squared. The architect in him, the man who knew how to spot a structural failure, took over. "Do you have a way to play this on the house speakers?" he asked. His voice was no longer weary. It was ice. The ballroom was reaching a fever pitch. My father was mid-anecdote, regaling a circle of business associates about the expanding family legacy, while Elena stood center stage, hand-feeding a piece of my engagement cake to a beaming, oblivious guest. She looked like the picture of maternal grace, a saint in a stolen spotlight. David walked back into the room first. He didn't look at her. He walked straight to the DJ booth, leaning over to whisper something into the ear of the startled young man behind the decks. I followed a few paces behind, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Everyone, if I could have your attention for just one more moment," David said, picking up the microphone. His voice was steady, unnervingly so. The chatter died down. My mother clasped her hands to her chest, whispering to a friend, "Oh, look, David's going to do a proper toast to the baby." Elena turned, a practiced, radiant smile fixed on her face. "Oh, David, you didn't have to." "I did," David interrupted, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was no love left in them, only the cold clarity of a man who had seen the blueprint of his own ruin. Tonight has been a night of surprises. My sister-in-law, Sarah, is starting a new chapter of her life. And my wife just shared some news that truly redefines our marriage. He looked at me and nodded. I reached into the DJ's mixer, where I had plugged in the digital recorder via a small auxiliary cable the technician had provided in a daze of confusion. "I think," David said, stepping back from the mic, "it's important we all hear the full story behind this miracle." I pressed play. The high-definition speakers, designed for party hits and romantic ballads, instead broadcast the cold, tinny acoustics of the powder room. "David actually thinks he's the father. Can you believe it?" The room froze. It was as if someone had sucked the oxygen out of the ballroom. My mother's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble. Elena's face didn't just go pale, it went vacant, the mask of the doting mother-to-be disintegrating in real time. "If I didn't get pregnant now, he was going to serve the papers by Monday. This baby is my permanent paycheck, Chloe." As Elena's recorded laughter echoed off the gilded ceiling, the real Elena lunged for the DJ booth, her heels skidding. "Turn it off. That's a fake. Sarah, you jealous bitch, turn it off." But David stepped in her path. He didn't touch her. He simply stood there, a mountain of quiet fury. "Is it fake, Elena? Because the physical therapist's name is mentioned in the next 30 seconds. Should we keep listening to find out if Sarah faked that detail too?" The recording hit the part about the Dubai trip. The guests, our family, our friends, David's bosses, stood in a silence so profound you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Elena stopped. She looked around the room, seeing not the adoration she craved, but the reflected horror of 100 people watching a monster unmasked. She looked at our parents. My father had turned his back. My mother was covering her mouth, weeping not for Elena, but for the shame of the public spectacle. "The party is over," David said into the silence. He pulled a slim white envelope from his inner jacket pocket, the papers he'd been carrying all night, waiting for the right moment that would now never come. He dropped them at Elena's feet. "I'll see you in court. And don't worry about the paycheck. We'll be doing a DNA test the second that child is born." He turned to me, gave a single solemn nod of thanks, and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. Elena stood alone in the center of the dance floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her own vanity, the permanent paycheck, now nothing more than a legal liability. The ballroom emptied with a speed that was almost haunting. Guests shuffled out in a daze, their hushed whispers echoing against the marble. My parents left without a word to me, their faces etched with a shame they had finally earned. Elena was a crumpled heap of silk and tears on the floor. Her best friend, Chloe, nowhere to be found. I stood by the DJ booth, the silence finally settling over me like a heavy, comforting blanket. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mark. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and a newfound, profound respect. "You've been carrying that all night," he said softly. It wasn't a question. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," I replied, my voice steady and calm. "If I had told you, you would have tried to protect me. You would have tried to stop her before the party." But Elena didn't just need to be stopped. She needed to be seen, truly seen. In the weeks that followed, the silent revenge I had taken wasn't about the public humiliation. It was about the boundaries that finally clicked into place. David moved out that night and filed for an immediate annulment based on fraud. The DNA test later confirmed the child wasn't his. My parents tried to call me, to guilt me for ruining the family name, but for the first time in my life, I didn't pick up. I didn't send a wire transfer. I didn't offer an apology for standing up in the light. The true vindication wasn't the recording. It was the piece of a phone that didn't ring with someone else's crisis. It was the joy of planning a wedding, a small, private ceremony this time, where the only people in attendance were those who actually loved the person I was, not the shadow I provided. Elena lost her paycheck, her reputation, and her grip on my life. I didn't hate her. I just finally stopped letting her existence define mine. Sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is walk away and let the silence tell the truth. Thank you for listening to this story on Silent Revenge Lab. Have you ever had a sibling or a family member try to steal your moment, only for the truth to come out in the end? We want to hear your stories of vindication. Drop a comment below. We read every single one. If you found this story resonant, please like and share this video. It helps us reach more people who might feel invisible right now. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment of justice. Until next time, stay grounded and remember, the truth always finds its way to the microphone.